Los Angeles, 1965. The air inside the gym smelled like old leather and sweat. It was the kind of place where iron met flesh, where men came to prove something to themselves or to anyone watching. The walls were stained with years of effort, the mirrors cracked at the edges, and the sound of heavy weights hitting the floor echoed like thunder through the small space. This wasn't a modern fitness center with bright lights and motivational posters. This was a place where only the serious came, where reputation mattered more than comfort. In the corner, beneath a single flickering fluorescent light, stood a man who didn't belong. At least that's what everyone thought when they first saw him. BruceLee, 5'7", 135 pounds. Wearing simple black pants and a fitted white shirt, he moved through the gym with the kind of quiet confidence that most people mistake for arrogance. But it wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of, without needing to announce it to the world. He wasn't there to lift heavy weights or to impress anyone. He was there to train, to refine, to sharpen the blade that was his body and mind. Bruce approached a wooden dummy in the corner, a Wing Chun training tool that looked ancient and out of place among the barbells and benches. He began moving, his strikes sharp and rhythmic, each one landing with a sound that cut through the noise of the gym. His movements were controlled, precise, almost meditative. There was no wasted motion, no excess energy, just efficiency, but not everyone appreciated efficiency. Across the gym, near the squat rack, stood a man who was the complete opposite of Bruce Lee in every physical way. His name was Rick. 300 pounds of solid muscle, arms like tree trunks, a chest so broad it seemed to fill the entire space around him. He was known in the gym as the guy who sparred with Muhammad Ali once, a story he told to anyone who would listen. And in this world, size meant power. Muscle meant dominance. And Rick believed he was untouchable. He noticed Bruce almost immediately, not because Bruce was doing anything flashy, but because he wasn't. In a gym full of men grunting and straining under heavy iron, Bruce looked almost peaceful. And that bothered Rick. It bothered him because it challenged everything he believed about strength. How could someone that small, that lean, carry themselves with such confidence? Rick set down the barbell he was holding and wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He walked toward Bruce slowly, deliberately, his heavy footsteps making the floor creak beneath him. A few other guys in the gym noticed and stopped what they were doing. They knew what was coming. Rick had a reputation for testing people, for putting them in their place. He stopped a few feet away from Bruce, arms crossed over his massive chest, and just stared. Bruce continued his training, still focused on the wooden dummy, his strikes coming faster now, each one making a sharp crack that echoed off the walls. He knew Rick was there. He could feel the man's presence, the weight of his ego filling the space between them. But Bruce didn't stop, didn't acknowledge him, not yet. Rick's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being ignored. "Hey," Rick said, his voice deep and rough like gravel. "You lost or something?" Bruce stopped mid-strike. He turned his head slightly, just enough to glance at Rick from the corner of his eye. He didn't say anything, just looked. His expression was calm, neutral, almost curious. Like he was studying Rick the same way he studied his opponents in a fight, reading him, understanding him, before deciding how to respond. Rick took that silence as weakness. "You're nothing but bones, man," Rick said, louder now, making sure everyone in the gym could hear. A few guys chuckled. One of them whispered something to his buddy. The energy in the room shifted. It wasn't hostile yet, but it was heading that way. "What are you even doing here? This is a place for real men, real strength, not whatever that is you're doing." Bruce turned fully now, facing Rick directly. He didn't look angry. He didn't look offended. He just looked present, fully there, like he had all the time in the world and nothing to prove. And somehow that made Rick even more uncomfortable. "I'm training," Bruce said simply. His voice was calm, steady, without a trace of fear or aggression. "Training?" Rick laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Training for what?" "A dance competition." More laughter from the peanut gallery. Rick was playing to the crowd now, feeding off their energy. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over Bruce like a dark cloud. Listen, little man, I don't know what they taught you wherever you came from, but here, size matters, strength matters. You walk in here looking like you weigh less than my warm-up set, and you expect people to take you seriously. Bruce didn't flinch, didn't step back. He just stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, breathing slow and even. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in Bruce, but in the room. A few of the older guys, the ones who had been around long enough to see real fighters, stopped smiling. They knew that look, that stillness. It was the stillness of a coiled spring, of something dangerous pretending to be harmless. Rick didn't see it. Or maybe he did, and his ego wouldn't let him back down. Tell you what, Rick said, cracking his knuckles. How about we settle this the old-fashioned way, you and me, right here? Let's see if all that fancy footwork means anything when you're standing in front of someone who can actually hit. If you've ever been in a situation where you knew the outcome before it even started, drop a comment. Sometimes the loudest voices don't realize they're about to learn the quietest lesson. The gym went silent, not the kind of silence that comes from shock, but the kind that comes from anticipation. Everyone had stopped what they were doing. Weights were set down. Conversations paused mid-sentence. All eyes were on Bruce and Rick, standing in the center of the floor like two opposing forces about to collide. The air felt heavier, charged with tension, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Bruce looked at Rick for a long moment. He didn't look scared, he didn't look excited, he just looked aware. Like he was calculating something in his mind, running through scenarios, possibilities, outcomes. And then slowly he nodded. "All right," Bruce said quietly. "But we're not fighting, we're sparring. And when it's over, it's over." Rick grinned, a wide, confident smile that showed all his teeth. "Sure, sure. Whatever you say, Bones." Someone cleared a space in the middle of the gym, pushing benches and equipment to the sides. The two men stood facing each other, about 10 feet apart. Rick bounced on his toes, rolling his shoulders, cracking his neck. He looked like a boulder preparing to roll down a mountain. Bruce, on the other hand, stood perfectly still. His hands were loose at his sides, his stance relaxed, almost casual. But if you looked closely, you could see the focus in his eyes, the sharpness, the readiness. Rick moved first. He came forward with the confidence of a man who had never lost a fight in his life. His fists were up, his guard tight, and he threw a heavy jab aimed directly at Bruce's face. It was fast for a man his size, powerful, the kind of punch that could drop most people cold if it landed. It didn't land. Bruce moved like water, not away but around. His head tilted just enough to let the punch sail past his ear, so close that Rick could probably feel the air move, but not close enough to connect. Before Rick could even pull his arm back, Bruce had already shifted his weight, repositioned, and reset. He was in a different place now, just slightly to the side, his hands still down, his expression unchanged. Rick blinked, confused. He threw another punch, this time a straight right, putting his full body weight behind it. Again, Bruce moved. A small step, a shift of the hips, and the punch missed by inches. Rick's fist cut through empty air, and the momentum carried him forward, making him stumble slightly. He caught himself, but his confidence was starting to crack. "Stay still," Rick muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. Bruce didn't respond. He just kept moving, not running, not circling aggressively, just adjusting. Like he was playing a game that Rick didn't even know the rules to. Every time Rick threw a punch, Bruce was already somewhere else. It was like trying to hit smoke, and with every miss, Rick got angrier. His breathing got heavier. His movements became wilder, less controlled. He threw a hook, then an uppercut, then another jab, all in rapid succession. Bruce avoided them all. Not with big dramatic movements, but with tiny, efficient adjustments. A tilt of the head, a step to the side, a slight lean back. He made it look easy, effortless, and that made Rick look slow, clumsy, desperate. The guys watching started to shift uncomfortably. A few exchanged glances. They had expected Bruce to get flattened in the first few seconds. But now, 30 seconds in, Rick hadn't landed a single punch, and Bruce hadn't even tried to hit back. Rick's face was red now, a mix of exertion and embarrassment. He wound up for a massive overhand right, the kind of punch that could break bones if it connected. He put everything he had into it, every ounce of his 300 pounds. The punch came down like a hammer. Bruce moved. But this time he didn't just avoid. As Rick's punch came down, Bruce stepped inside, so close that their bodies almost touched. He was inside Rick's range now, in the pocket where big punches lose their power. And then in a motion so fast it was almost invisible, Bruce's hand shot out. Not a punch, a strike. His fingers extended, his palm flat, and he drove his hand forward into Rick's solar plexus, right below the ribcage. It lasted less than a second, maybe half a second. But the sound it made was sharp, like a whip crack, and the effect was immediate. Rick's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His entire body locked up, every muscle seizing at once, and then he stumbled backward, his legs shaky, his balance gone. He tried to catch himself, grabbing onto a nearby bench, but his knees buckled. He didn't fall completely, but he was bent over, gasping for air, one hand pressed against his chest. Bruce stepped back, his hand returning to his side. He wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't even sweating. He just stood there calm and composed like nothing had happened. The gym was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence, not anticipation, shock. Rick finally managed to suck in a breath, a loud, ragged gasp that echoed through the room. He straightened up slowly, still holding his chest, his face a mixture of pain and disbelief. He looked at Bruce like he was seeing him for the first time. "What?" Rick's voice was hoarse. "What did you do?" Bruce didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't make a show of it. He just looked at Rick with that same calm expression. "I used your force against you," Bruce said simply. "You came at me with all your weight, all your power, and I just redirected it." Rick shook his head, still trying to process what had just happened. "But I didn't even, you barely touched me." "That's the point," Bruce said. "Real power isn't about how hard you hit, it's about where you hit, when you hit, and how you use the energy that's already there. Sometimes we confuse force with power. If this story is making you rethink what strength really means, go ahead and hit that like button. Not because I asked, but because it resonates." Rick stood there, one hand still pressed against his chest, breathing heavily. The color was slowly returning to his face, but the shock hadn't left his eyes. He looked around the gym, at the other men who were watching, and you could see it happening in real time, the collapse of his ego. He had walked into this moment so sure of himself, so certain that his size and strength made him untouchable. And now, in front of everyone, he had been dismantled by a man half his size who barely even tried. Bruce didn't push it. He could have. He could have said something cutting, something that would have driven the lesson home even harder. But that wasn't his way. He had made his point. The rest was up to Rick to process. "You all right?" Bruce asked, his tone genuine, not mocking. Rick nodded slowly, still catching his breath. Yeah, I'm good." He paused, then looked Bruce directly in the eyes. "How did you do that?" Bruce took a step closer, his posture open, non-threatening. "You put everything into that last punch. All your weight, all your momentum, all your anger. But when you do that, you become predictable. And predictability is a weakness. I didn't overpower you. I just waited for the right moment, stepped into your space, and used the energy you were already generating. Your own force knocked the wind out of you, I just helped it along." Rick stared at him, processing. "So, it's not about being stronger." "No," Bruce said. "It's about being smarter, faster, more aware. Strength is useful, but if you rely on it alone, you'll always be limited by your own body. Technique, timing, precision, those have no weight limit. A small man with perfect timing can defeat a giant with perfect strength. Every time." One of the other guys in the gym, an older man with a thick mustache and scarred knuckles, stepped forward. He had been watching the whole thing from the side, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "I've been in this game for 30 years, he said, his voice gravelly. And I've never seen anything like that. What style are you using? It's called Jeet Kune Do, Bruce said. The way of the intercepting fist. It's not a traditional style, it's a philosophy. I take what works and discard what doesn't. No wasted movement, no rigid forms, just efficiency. The older man nodded slowly, respect in his eyes. You're teaching this. I am, Bruce said. But not to everyone. Only to those who are willing to unlearn what they think they know. Rick straightened up fully now, his breathing back to normal. He looked at Bruce with a mix of humility and curiosity. Could you teach me? Bruce studied him for a moment, then nodded. If you're serious, yes, but you have to leave your ego at the door. What happened here today? That's the first lesson. Size doesn't matter, ego doesn't matter, only understanding matters. Rick extended his hand. I'm serious. Bruce shook it. And just like that, the tension in the room evaporated. The other men started to move again, picking up weights, going back to their routines. But something had shifted. You could feel it. BruceLee had walked into this gym as an outsider, someone who didn't fit the mold of what they thought strength looked like. And now, without raising his voice, without boasting, without unnecessary violence, he had earned their respect. One of the younger guys, maybe 22, 23, approached Bruce cautiously. Hey, I've been training here for a year. Trying to get stronger, trying to get bigger. But watching that, I don't know, man. It made me realize I might be missing something. Can I ask you a question? Go ahead, Bruce said. Why do you train the way you do? What's the purpose? Bruce thought for a moment, then answered. Most people train to look strong. They want the appearance of power. They want people to look at them and be impressed. But I train to be functional. I train so that my body can do what my mind tells it to do, instantly, without hesitation. I'm not interested in looking like I can fight. I'm interested in actually being able to fight. And more importantly, I'm interested in being able to live fully, to move freely, to express myself physically without limitation. The young man nodded slowly, absorbing the words. So it's not just about fighting. No, Bruce said. Fighting is just one application. It's about mastery, mastery of your body, mastery of your mind, mastery of your emotions. When you master those things, everything else becomes easier, not just fighting. Life. Another man, this one older, mid-40s with a thick build and tired eyes, spoke up from the bench press. I've been lifting for 20 years, and I'm strong. I can move serious weight, but I can't move like you. I can't react like you. Is it too late for me? Bruce looked at him, his expression kind. It's never too late, but you have to be willing to start over. You have to be willing to admit that what you've been doing, while valuable, might not be complete. Strength is a foundation, but it's not the whole house. You need flexibility. You need speed. You need coordination. You need awareness. And most of all, you need adaptability. The ability to change, to adjust, to respond to the moment as it happens. That's what makes a complete martial artist. A complete human being. The older man nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. Maybe I'll come by your school sometime. You're welcome anytime, Bruce said. For the next hour, the gym felt different. Men who had been training in isolation, focused only on their own routines, started talking to each other, asking questions, sharing insights. Bruce stayed for a while, demonstrating techniques, explaining concepts, answering questions. He didn't charge anyone, didn't promote his school. He just gave freely, the way a teacher does when they genuinely care about the growth of others. Rick, the man who had started the confrontation, stayed close to Bruce the entire time. He watched everything, asked questions, took mental notes. At one point, he pulled Bruce aside. I want to apologize, Rick said, his voice low. I was out of line. I judged you based on what I thought strength was supposed to look like, and I was wrong. Bruce put a hand on his shoulder. You weren't wrong to value strength. You were just incomplete in your understanding of it. Now you know better. And that makes you more dangerous than you were an hour ago, not because you're more aggressive, but because you're more aware. Rick smiled, a real smile this time, not the cocky grin from earlier. Thank you, Bruce nodded. See you at the school. If you've ever had a moment where someone completely changed the way you see yourself or the world, this is your space. That's what real teachers do. If you want more of this kind of storytelling, make sure you're subscribed. This is where we dig deeper into lessons that actually matter. As the sun began to set outside, casting long shadows through the gym's small windows, Bruce Lee gathered his things. The wooden dummy he had been training on earlier stood in the corner, silent and still, a witness to everything that had unfolded. Bruce ran his hand over its worn surface one last time before turning toward the exit. But before he could leave, the older man with the scarred knuckles approached him again. "You know," the man said, "I've been in a lot of gyms. Seen a lot of tough guys, but I've never seen anyone do what you did today. And I don't just mean the technique. I mean the way you handled it. You didn't humiliate him. You didn't gloat. You could have, but you didn't." "Why?" Bruce paused, his hand on the door. "Because humiliating someone doesn't teach them anything except resentment. I didn't come here to prove I was better. I came here to train. Rick made it about ego. I made it about education. If he learns from this, then everyone wins. If he doesn't, then nothing I said or did will matter anyway." The older man smiled. "You're a rare breed, kid." "I'm just a student," Bruce said, "same as everyone else." He pushed open the door and stepped out into the cool evening air. The streets of Los Angeles were busy, cars honking, people rushing past, the city alive with its usual chaos. But Bruce moved through it all with the same calm presence he had carried in the gym. He wasn't in a hurry, wasn't distracted, just present. Back inside the gym, the men continued their training, but something had changed. Rick, who had once been the loudest, most dominant presence in the room, was now quieter, more thoughtful. He approached the wooden dummy Bruce had been using and studied it. He threw a tentative punch, then another, trying to mimic the precision and economy of movement he had witnessed. It was clumsy at first, but it was a start. The younger guy who had asked about purpose was at the heavy bag, but instead of just wailing on it with wild hooks, he was paying attention to his footwork, his balance, his breathing. The older man on the bench press finished his set, then got up and started stretching, something he hadn't done in years. One encounter, 5 seconds of action. And yet the ripple effect was undeniable. This is the thing about real power. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It just is. And when it's demonstrated, when it's expressed with precision and restraint, it changes people. Not because it forces them to change, but because it shows them what's possible. It opens a door they didn't even know existed. Bruce Lee understood this better than most. He knew that strength without wisdom is just violence. That power without control is just chaos. That skill without humility is just arrogance. And he lived his life accordingly. Not to be admired, though he was. Not to be feared, though he could be. But to be understood. To be a living example of what happens when you refine yourself, when you commit to mastery, when you strip away everything unnecessary and focus only on what works. That night, as Rick lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he replayed the encounter in his mind. The moment Bruce's hand struck his chest, the way his entire body had seized up. The shock, the embarrassment, but also the lesson. He realized that for years he had been building a fortress of muscle, thinking it would protect him from the world. But in 5 seconds, Bruce had shown him that all that muscle meant nothing if he didn't understand how to use it. If he didn't understand timing, distance, leverage, intent. Rick made a decision that night. He would go to Bruce's school. He would learn. And more importantly, he would unlearn. He would let go of the ego that had been running his life and open himself up to something deeper, something real. The next morning, Rick showed up at Bruce Lee's school. It was a small space, nothing fancy, with mirrors on the walls and mats on the floor. Bruce was already there, training alone, moving through forms with the same focus and intensity Rick had seen at the gym. When Bruce noticed him, he stopped and smiled. "You came," Bruce said. "I said I would," Rick replied. "Good. Then let's begin." And they did, not with heavy weights or aggressive sparring, but with basics, with breathing, with stance, with awareness. Rick, the man who had once believed his size made him invincible, was now learning to move like water, to bend like bamboo, to strike like lightning. It wasn't easy. His body resisted. His mind rebelled. But slowly, over weeks and months, he began to change, not just physically but mentally, spiritually. He learned that real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. That real power isn't loud. It's quiet, controlled, precise, and that the most dangerous people in the world are often the ones you'd never expect, the ones who don't need to prove anything because they've already proven it to themselves. Years later, Rick would tell the story of that day in the gym, not to brag but to teach. He would tell young fighters, young lifters, young men full of ego and bravado about the time he learned the most important lesson of his life. That size doesn't matter. That strength without wisdom is hollow. And that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from being humble enough to learn from them. Bruce Lee walked into that gym as an outsider. He left as a teacher, and in the process he changed lives, not by forcing change but by embodying it, by living it, by showing through action and restraint what true mastery looks like. So here's the question. What are you building? Are you building a fortress of appearances, hoping people will respect you based on how you look? Or are you building something real, something functional, something that works not just in theory but in practice? Because when the moment comes, when you're tested, when life throws a punch you didn't see coming, it won't matter how big you are. It won't matter how strong you look. All that will matter is whether you've done the work, whether you've trained not just your body but your mind, your spirit, your character. That's the lesson Bruce Lee taught that day. And it's the lesson that still echoes now, decades later. Real power is quiet. Real strength is controlled. And real mastery is earned in silence, one rep, one breath, one moment at a time. If you made it this far, you're the kind of person this channel was built for. Someone who values depth over distraction, wisdom over noise. If that's you, subscribe, not for me, for you. Because this is where we go deeper, always.